which is supported by International Visegrad Fund. And today's lecture will be provided by our professor, Dr. Habilitowany Leszek Zasztowt, who is a professor of Warsaw University and representative of Warsaw University. And I want to say that today's topic will be very interesting for humanitarian specialty. And also I want to remind you that this lecture will be recorded and you can find it on YouTube for 2 days after our techniques will make some magic. It will be on YouTube on YouTube page of University of Warsaw and Center for East European Studies. So I see that more people are connecting with us. And I want to thank to Professor Zasztowt for his acceptance of our proposition to be our lecturer. And I warmly welcome him and give him a word for this lecture.
In typical English, we are moving. I give the floor. Okay, so
I give the floor.
So I'm sitting on the chair, on the floor, so I'm already, let's say, embrace my floor at my apartment. I try to start with the slideshow. Tell me, please, do you see it correctly? Do you see it? Someone has to.
Yes, everything okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So this is the title of this class, middle of this lesson, lecture, middle class intelligentsia, intellectuals in East Central Europe. That was a part of the, let's say, larger entity. That was one of the lectures connected with the social stratification in East Central Europe. That's why you have here at the bottom, you have social stratification, and here is kind of as a wood, the photography of wood. So we have upper class, middle class, working class, lower class, impoverished. So today I'm going to focus on the middle class, which is not so easy concerning the East Central Europe, or the former Soviet bloc countries, because our middle class, of course, it's already it exists already, and everything with this is quite similar now to the situation in the Western Europe. But in general, the origins were very similar in the West and the East of Europe. But the period of the real socialism during the time of the USSR changed the situation in very, let's say, high grade. So typical ladder of the capitalist society, which might be divided, there are different patterns of those divisions. But I, of course, use the materials which I could find in the internet. So that's the ladder of capitalism system, or the ladder of capitalism society. Of course, this is a caricature taken from the Industrial Worker, probably a leftist journal on the beginning of the 20th century, in my opinion, around World War I, probably somewhere should be the date of this. So you can see, we work for all, that's the bottom. Then we have one step up, we eat for you. So this might be now defined, that at that time was a kind of a middle class, or let's say those bourgeois class. Then we shoot at you, so the army. Then we fool you, that the priests, of course, and also the judges and so on. And the top, we rule you. So the people at the top, the kings, the emperors, the presidents, the prime ministers, and so on. So that was typical view of the divisions of Europe in the 19th century and in the 20th century too. And that was the moment in the 19th century when the middle class started to emerge. And its typical definition, which I use, would be the most simple as possible. The middle class is a description given to the individuals and households who fall between the working class and the upper class within a societal hierarchy. In Western culture, persons in the middle class tend to have a higher proportion of college degrees than those in the working class, have more income available for consumption, and may own property. Thus, in the middle class often are employed as professionals, managers, and as civil servants. So in this definition, you can see easily that the term middle class, which was, let's say, which conquered the world of the intellectual life of Europe, of Western Europe in the 19th century, was strictly connected also with the professionals, managers, and civil servants. And in our part of Europe, in Poland, also in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, also in Russia, in Ukraine, Lithuania, and Belarus, this middle class was very often historically called Intelligentsia. So Intelligentsia, those are these professionals who are working by, let's say, the work of their minds. So that's why I try to divide what's the difference, difference between the middle class in the Western sense and the Intelligentsia in East European sense. So middle class is our main topic. And we try to dig deeper a bit in the what does it mean now and how it was before. The word middle may be misleading in that that suggests that those in the middle class have earning within the middle of the population income distribution, which may not be the case. Here is the opinion of who will be here used a bit. He referred to the middle class as a part of the bourgeoisie when he described capitalism. The term itself has shifted in meaning over time, having once referred to persons who had the means to rival nobles. Of course, that's true. This middle class, the main rivalry for them were the nobility. So nobility, the gentry, was in the 19th century, this, let's say, class, as we are using the 19th century and English terms, because for example, in Polish and in Russia, there are let's say, different words to describe the situation. We often use the term stan, so which can be also used as a state in English, or stratum, so the kind of layer. But I will use this term, the class, which came from Marx, of course, because that's the good term to describe, to depict the problems. So that's the variety of the people who are mostly from their birth in the high left corner to the old times in the let's say down right corner. They're the people who are mostly the professionals who can fulfill the professions which are very needed in the society. Therefore, they are better paid and better, and those people as a class, they have a better had the better prospects for the future because of their possibility to get involved in the industry, in the education, in every field of the social activities. So the term middle class is very old from today's point of view, because probably it was first coined by James Bradshaw in the 1745 pamphlet, Scheme to Prevent Running Irish Fools to France. So that probably was the first time when the term middle class was used. The term has had various, even contradictory meanings. In medieval European society, 8th, 12th centuries, a middle class composed primarily of peasants who form a new bourgeoisie based on the success of their mercantile ventures, eventually overdue the ruling monarchies of their society and ultimately led to the rise of the capitalist society. So those people who came mostly from peasantry in the Middle Ages, because of the successes in the mercantile life, in the trade and so on, they managed to gather this quite, let's say, maybe not significant, but visible fortunes, the amount of money, and they started to let's say press the higher ranks of the society, as for example the gentry, nobility, and took their places. And mostly that happened in the urban environment. So the towns were the nucleus of the middle class in general, because at the country the nobility, the knights and the gentry, they've been ruling without change, or the church. But in the urban environment, those new people started to take place of the former nobility. Within capitalism, middle class initially referred to the bourgeoisie. So we very often in the Marxist terminology or English terminology use the word bourgeoisie to depict whom? The person who is living in urban environment in the city, who is working as a professional in some, let's say, field. That might be the trade, that might be the bank, the financing, that might be the education, that might be many other officials, bureaucracy, and so on. So this is very often in old sense bourgeoisie. Later, the further differentiation of classes as a capitalist society developed, the term came to be synonymous with the term petit bourgeoisie. So there was some period in the history where those people from representing middle class were called petit bourgeoisie. In Polish, that would be drobnomieszczaństwo. So the division were always visible, as you know, on this caricature you can see the upper class people, or even upper middle class people, maybe not aristocracy, but the bourgeoisie people in all the terms, and the let's say working class, or even impoverished person from the lower ranks of the society. And you can see that those people are keeping their heads above, and they knew that their value in the society is much higher than this person in the middle, who is on the other hand, he's a beggar, so he is asking for money. And so, but the situation has changed, and in the 20th century, with the crises which happened in the 20th century, and I have to remind you at first the crisis of the end of the 1920s, the big collapse in the United States, which later, let's say, covered all Western world, but not only Western world. It resulted in the mass degradation, social degradation, even of the people from the middle class. So this is a very fine caricature showing you that the middle class gentleman is walking on the street, and he see the beggar who is sitting on the corner of the two streets and asking for money. He's taking to give him a coin to his hand, but he look at this beggar, and he can imagine himself as a person who lost a job, and that he is here, and this one is probably here. So the poverty trap for a middle class of Europe, and that's happened first time on the mass scale at the end of 1920s and prolonged till the midst of the 1930s. Then were a second such a collapse in the not so long ago, during this after the year 2000. In 2000, as I remember, 2009 or 2000, that was not on such a scale as in the 20s, but also it emerged even in the 21st century. So the main attribute of the middle class all around the world, and mostly in the capitalist world, is that this is the class which is a base for each, let's say, modern, new Western type society. And here I found in the internet the diagram which show you from the year 2017, showing you how much income middle income households having difficulties to make ends in Europe in 2007. That was just after the second crisis I mentioned in the years 2009, 2011. Then there was the collapse of the banking in the United States, and so on. I'm not going to go deeper in this topic, but you can see the problems. Share of the middle class, middle income household having difficulties to make ends meet in Europe in 2007. So that was the big crisis in Greece at that moment, as you remember, the big credit crisis. And in Greece, that was a situation which absolutely destroyed the position of the middle class in Greece for a few years. Then you can see Lithuania, Hungary, Latvia, so our part of Europe, Italy, Portugal, Slovakia, and so on, Slovenia, Poland. So Slovenia and Poland, for example, were quite in a not so bad society. So over 50% of the population of the middle class people, households, they have let's say problems with making end to meet the end of the months. So the best situation.
Przepraszam.
Yes. Yes.
The slides are not rolling.
It's not rolling because you can see I'm still on this Europe middle class under pressure. Do you see this slide?
We see the first one, the middle class intelligentsia.
That's strange.
You need to click on another slide. That's why I'm saying sorry.
Okay, so I don't know that. So maybe I should stop at the moment and then come here once more. Do you see it or not?
1 second. For this moment, we don't see nothing.
Okay, just a moment. I do it once more. Okay. Now is the problem. Just a moment. Just a moment. Okay, now it should work. So I try to open this slideshow once more on this slide. Do you see it?
At this moment, no. Oh, yes.
So I was
Europe's middle class under pressure.
Yes, so I was all the time on this slide, Europe's middle class under pressure. So you can see to end this commentary that the best situation was, of course, in the Scandinavian countries. So you can see Finland, Denmark, Netherlands. No, Netherlands is not Scandinavia, but Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland. These countries were, let's say, in the best situation at the moment when this crisis of the first decade of the 21st century started. So how looked the situation in Poland? Do you see the situation in Poland?
No. Still Europe's middle class under pressure. Maybe you need to click on it.
That should work. Yeah, I don't know what's happened here.
Oh, now Professor Henryk Domański.
Okay, so
yes.
Okay, but I have to start from the. Now you have a whole screen. Do you have a whole screen?
We have a situation in Poland.
All right. Okay, so this is the situation in Poland. I start to say a few words about the situation in Poland concerning this person. That's Professor Henryk Domański, former director of the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology of Polish Academy of Sciences, and he is an expert. He's an expert of the contemporary situation of let's say middle class in Poland, mostly of intelligentsia. His books in Polish are about the intelligentsia, but his books in English are the Polish middle classes. Here you can see Henryk Domański, the Polish middle class. But why I am showing you this books, just to let you know that there are books which you can use to get the information in detail. I have no enough time to tell you all this. You can all these things. So you can go straight to the Domański books, for example, the Polish middle class, or the failure or success, middle class crisis. That's Ernst Milner also. That's the books will discuss the situation after the last crisis, last financial crisis. So here is another book, The Road to Whatever, Middle Class Culture and Crisis of Adolescence, and so on. So there is a lot of books on the topic. I'm not to press you to read it, but all those books are showing us the situation that previously, let's say, very good position of the middle class after 2010, 2011 started to deteriorate. Why that's happened? Because of the growing differences in the income of the people who are upper class on the top and who are working class and middle class. So the number of representatives of the middle class start to diminish from one point of view, and from the other point of view, the income of those middle class people also started to diminish. So here are two caricatures: upper class on the left, middle class in the middle, and working class on the right. And of course, here is the other division: foreign billionaires, everyone else, and troughs. So the people who are living probably as rentiers, so people who do not to work, but just to get the money from their family, which are quite rich, that they can live without problems on the account of their family's income, of their father's and mother's income, let's say. So there is also the word yuppie. You probably have heard this word. It's, in my opinion, this word yuppie exists already for a few decades, but it was popularized mostly in the 21st century. But in the 80s, yuppie was first published in a small Chicago magazine. So you can see the word yuppie emerged in the 80s, but started to be popular in the 21st century. Who is it, yuppie? A young, fashionable, and usually well-paid person is commonly known as being a yuppie. Being a young adult in a good profession while living in a large city will often get you called yuppie. You will find shows like New Girls, the first aired on 2011, feature key characters that would be considered yuppies, such as actor Max Greenfield, character in New Girl, known as a Schmidt. Of course, those relations, cultural relations, are from the American life, so not everything is very, let's say, enlightened to us. But still, there are some charts of the person which might be called yuppie, which are important: good profession, good knowledge of languages, good income monthly, yearly, of course, annually, and of course, after that, they have a special code of what to wear and how to behave. So there were even published handbooks for yuppies, the Yuppie Handbook, the State-of-Art Manual for Young Urban Professionals, and that's what I did not say. Yuppie came from the word young urban professionals. So that's how the word yuppie emerged. And here is another, the Yuppie Handbook, second edition. And you can see that those people had to wear a special suits because they are working in the, let's say, important. That, of course, is not true today, because in the United States and even in Europe, that has much has changed. Mostly in the banking, they stayed like this, on the right and on the left. But in the other professionals, as in let's say in networks, in all those Google and so on, Amazon and so on, the people are not have to wear such a things. They can be dressed like they want to, let's say, in a regular way. But still, there was the moment when it was the fashion, and you can even hear that coach back here, iPod must be here, facial expression of superiority. So when you look at the face of the person, you can at the moment understand that he is from the upper side of the society. Of course, that now that has changed much than on those handbooks on UP. But of still, UP as a new working class, you can treat them as a new working class, but of course on the much higher level of standard of living. So here is a photograph of the young pair, couple in the street of New York. This is very funny because they of course are dressed very elegant way, and they are called here working class. But in fact, they are the working class. And one thing which I did not tell you earlier, that this middle class in the West started to be, probably I said it, the base of the all capitalist societies. So the middle class was a natural base of the all capitalist society. So the deterioration of the position of the middle class resulted in the problems with the system, with the economical problems of the system, because the number of people who had, let's say, serious income diminished, and the possibility of buy goods started to be lower. And that was the beginning of our crisis today in the world, in the Western world. So, of course, the income, the money are the most important. I found such a photograph in the internet. So here, of course, the middle class would be those fellow in yellow and in blue. Let's say let's say a lighter shade of blue, because this one and this one are lower. Of course, conservatism, there comes the ideology. The conservatism is very often connected with the social divisions. And there is a lot of people, and what is strange for me always, who are from the different corners of the society. They might be from the upper class, they might be from the middle class, and they might be from the lower class, from the working class, former working class, who represent the conservative point of view on the world. So the starting point of these views is that the situation in the past was better than it's now. So only one correct way to solve the problems of today's life is get back to the relation which have already existed. So this is kind of a social conservatism, political conservatism, which is rooted in the today's problems of the society. That's, on the other hand, we have, of course, the populism, which is all-embracing ideology coming from the political circles, which only partially is conservative. So populism, from one hand, is conservative from the social point of view very often, but from the other hand, from the social point of view concerning income, concerning the position of the, let's say, someone as an ordinary man, ordinary woman in the society, is very close to socialism. Because in the populist ideology, the income in the society should be divided more justifiably, more correctly. Okay, and of course, in the conservative system, the family is the nucleus of the whole society. So I found such a beautiful photograph of the family here. So the family is a base in not only conservative ideology on political views, but also in the populist point of view, that the family is a nucleus, is a core of the society. And what must be stressed here, that also in the typical middle class approach, the family is the most important. So there is in general no differences between this conservatism or later populism and the traditional approach in the middle class to the family. Not only even in the middle class only, because in the upper class too, and in the let's say lower classes of the society too. The family is always a core of the whole story. Middle class in Russia. And in Russia, the situation is a bit different, because as a result of those changes which happened during the USSR period, so till 1991 at least, was the total disaster and the total destroying of the former middle class of the Russian Empire. So the nobility ceased to exist in Russia, the aristocracy ceased to exist in Russia, the Russian intelligentsia in typical, let's say, classy, in its classical shade or shape, was also destroyed and deteriorated. So during the period of the USSR, the new middle class started to emerge. Who was the nucleus of middle class in Russia at that moment? That was, of course, the people connected with the government, with the Communist Party, with what we are used to say with the Communist Party apparatus on the different levels, not only in the Central Committee or Politburo, but also in the ministries, in the huge state governed enterprises, in the industry, in the mining, in every field of the society. So they started to create a new class. So from this ranks mostly of the communist and communist families, but not only, you must remember, because there also were professionals, there also were the people of high level of education, the engineers, the medicine doctors, and so on. They started to create middle class. And this middle class, look from the point of income in Russia, I found in the internet information, share of money income in Russia by income tier 2012. So you can see the divisions in Russia are probably more visible even inside the middle class. I'm not telling about the whole Russian society, because who has been in Russia, who knew Russia, everyone knew that the divisions in the Russian society, in the Russian Federation, are much bigger, the social divisions, than they are, for example, in Poland or Lithuania, not to compare with France, Germany, or United Kingdom. So divisions of the society are much deeper. How to say, the gap between those who are rich and those who are middle and those who are very poor is much bigger. I don't have here a diagram showing you the general division in Russia of Russian society, but only the middle class. And on this diagram, you can see that 5% or 20% on the bottom of the middle class, they have, let's say, 5% of the, let's say, total income. 60%, or in general 38%, has the as this is here, and of only 20%, so 1/5 of the Russian middle class has its top, let's say, top income 47%. And even this diagram shows you that the divisions, even in the middle class, which seems to us all the most monolithic structure in the society, at least in the West and in Central Europe, even in Russia, in Eastern Europe, even in the most monolithic stratum, the divisions are huge. The divisions are huge, bigger than in the West. And of course, the revolution came and changed everything. I made such a picture here, how it was before the revolution on the left. It's probably St. Petersburg, and here it's situation from the 90s with a huge queues, lines to the shop because there were problems with food and so on during the Yeltsin times. But still.
Znów nie widzimy pana zdjęcia.
Okay, so I have to do the same as for us.
O, teraz jest.
Tak. Okay, to, and now you see on the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this
no, Professor Zasztowt, we didn't see the running presentation. We see only the PowerPoint program. So maybe that's why it's.
I see the presentation.
Okay, I try. There should be on the whole screen now. Do you have it or not?
I have.
I'm not.
So, sorry, I cannot help it. You have to look at the PowerPoint system in this way, because I cannot do more than I did. I'm using the PowerPoint and I'm starting from the, let's say, correct slide, and I see it on the whole screen. Okay, but let's continue the story. So you can see the well-educated, very beautiful woman on the first plan here of this line to the shop. That mustn't be to buy the meat, that might be to buy the books also, because that was also of renaissance of selling books in Russia. So, and now is like this educated class of young people, UPs, young urban professionals, looks like this in Russia. And this is the, from my point of view, I don't know how many of you are from Russia, but that is what President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin forgot, that Russia has changed. That Russia has changed, a new generation came, have been born, the generation of young, very high educated people who knew languages, who can easily, let's say, fly through the internet, who have all information what's going on in the surrounding world, and it's impossible to govern by those new people in the traditional way by putting them to the prison or to the labor camp. So this is the big problem of the contemporary Kremlin, those young, educated, high educated people. Of course, Russia is trying to change. Who knows Moscow? He remembers that this is the so-called Moscow Manhattan, which is, of course, beautiful part of Moscow, which is to a certain degree similar to the New York, let's say, solutions. Of course, the underground, you have the metro, the underground here, the underground station here. So everything is here is new. And it's also similar to one district in London that's called the Canary Wharf or the docks. So when you go to London, you can see such a new district in London, which is called Canary Wharf or the docks. And this is also kind of the docks in Moscow, or Canary Wharf in Moscow. But why I'm showing you this, that the modernization comes through every, let's say, single hole in the society. So in spite of the authoritarian regime in Russia, there are huge money which goes through the different hands and different figures connected with Vladimir Putin to modernize Russia, to make Russia great again, using the words of the former President Trump. Make Russia great again. But the problem is with the intelligentsia, so with these young people, as you can see on the photo. The intelligentsia, now the definition, Latin intelligentsia, Polish intelligentsia, Russian intelligentsia, and so on, is a status class of educated people engaged in the complex mental labors that critique, guide, and lead in shaping the culture and politics of their society. As a status class, the intelligentsia includes artists, teachers, academics, writers, and the literary hommes de lettres, individual members of the intelligentsia, and so on and so on. So this is our middle class. That's our middle class in East Central Europe, in Russia, in Poland, in Ukraine, in Lithuania. And we still are using the term intelligentsia. So sometimes when someone asks you on the street, what's your profession, or what are you doing? You can even hear that I'm intelligent, or I'm a member of intelligentsia, probably would be answer. So now the pictures of those, and the biggest problem is how to divide who is intelligentsia from the English point of the English terminology, who is intelligentsia and who is intellectual. Because intellectual is a bit different thing than intelligent or intelligentsia member. So here is the picture of intellectuals. somewhere in Russia. I don't remember whom I took, probably the professor of the Moscow University, but I'm not sure. Maybe someone recognized someone on this photo. So Intelligentsia status class arose in the late 18th century in Russian-controlled Poland. That's about the situation in Poland. During the age of partitions, so as a starting point of the Intelligentsia in Poland, we are using the 18th century. There is even a book, The History of Polish Intelligentsia, under the editorial supervising of already done, no, of deceased Professor Jerzy Jedlicki, 3 volumes about the history of Polish intelligentsia. And first volume was written by Maciej Janowski, the contemporary director of the Institute of History of Polish Academy of Sciences. And that he shows us the beginnings of intelligentsia in the 18th century. So 18th century was the starting point. In the 19th century, the Polish intellectual Bronisław Trentowski coined the term intelligentsia, intellectuals, but it's not exactly intellectuals, to identify and describe the educated and professionally active social stratum of the patriotic bourgeoisie who could be the cultural leaders of Poland, then under the authoritarian regime of the Russian Tsarist autocracy from the late 80s to the early 20th century. So intelligentsia in our part of Europe, in Russia, in Poland, in Ukraine, had to fulfill the role of the leaders of the Enlightenment, of the leaders of the political solutions in future, when this countries start to be independent, Poland, for example, and Ukraine or Lithuania. And they also had to, one of their important traits of the character was that they have to educate uneducated layers of the society. So they should go to the country during the summer to teach the children how to read, how to arithmetics, mathematics, and so on. So that was not only the role of the leaders, but also of those who are doing the job, who are making this job. In Russia, before the Bolshevik Revolution, the term intelligentsia described a status class of educated people whose cultural capital, schooling, education, enlightenment, allowed them to assume practical political leadership. Of course, that was the theory. In practice, the status and social function of the intelligentsia varied by society. In Eastern Europe, intellectuals were deprived of political influence and access to the effective levers of the economic development. The intelligentsia were at the functional periphery of their societies. In contrast, in the Western of Europe, that was absolutely opposite. Why that happened in our part of Europe? Because the Tsarist system, mostly in Russia, but even not in Habsburg, not in Hohenzollern Prussia, not in Habsburg Austro-Hungary, but in Russia, the political system was driven in such a way that there was no place for intelligentsia. That's why in Russia, a big number of those people connected with the Russian intelligentsia landed finally in Narodnaya Volia, and so all those organizations, and then in Social Democratic Party of the Workers of Russia, and later Bolshevik and Menshevik. Of course, Social Revolutionist Party and anarchists. So there were young people who were linked, or let's say connected with those people who were on this radical revolutionary side. Here another, that's probably Russian immigration from Paris. Zinaida Gorpspius and her husband, probably. That's picture from which I found in the internet. And there is, of course, very good book, which is very small, so I can recommend it. It's easy to read, accessible in Russian, in Polish, in English. The Russian Intelligentsia, written by one of the dissidents who had to out of Soviet Union, by Andrei Sieniawski. And Sieniawski wrote this small books, which is, in my opinion, very good, because he's showing us in this book how those old traditional Russian intelligentsia has changed during the period of the USSR. So how some traditional church elements has lost. So they are still visible when you talk with the old Russian intelligent person. And on opposite, there are also huge elements which came after the over 70 years of the USSR rule in Russia. So it's a kind of a mixture of the old and new. I'm not going to go deeper in this, what you can read in this book, but I can only recommend this book to read to you. Of course, there is a lot of books about this influence of revolution on the picture of intelligentsia. And for example, Jane Barbank, Intelligentsia and Revolution, Russian Views on Bolshevism, 1792, which is one of the many books on this topic. Here is Philip Pomper, very good book, The Russian Revolutionary Intelligentsia, because you have to remember that this new intelligentsia, which was starting to emerge after the revolution of 1917, they've been different. They've been only partially connected with the old traditional Russian or Georgian or Ukrainian intelligentsia, and they've been mostly created by this new political ideology. A lot of them were from the peasantry, from the working class, maybe not so much, but from the peasantry, a lot of people. A lot of them were not Russian origin, but Jewish origin, Polish origin, Ukrainian origin. So there were a mixture of nations. Of course, atheism was a very significant element of this, which was not important element before the revolution. Intelligentsia, Russian intelligentsia and Polish intelligentsia was in general was very, maybe not clerical, but was, let's say, positively facing the religion. So this Russian revolutionary intelligentsia started to create a new stratum. But this new stratum, during the times of the USSR, they had also changed. They has changed into the traditional, morphed in the traditional, let's say, picture of the Russian intelligentsia before the revolution. Of course, the intellectuals. That's now I have to define this intellectual. Who is the intellectuals? The intellectual is also the member of the middle class. He's also the member of intelligentsia in East and Central Europe, but he's at top. He's at the top of the let's say intellectual ladder of intelligentsia. So the intelligentsia in the class structure of the state socialist society. That's what I told you before. A few here. Here are some information. I probably will go on with it. Poverty rates in Central and Eastern Europe, percent of population below $4 per day, poverty threshold in 90s up to till 2009. So you can see how it looked in Bulgaria, red, Latvia, brown, Romania, blue, Estonia, brown, Lithuania, blue, Russia here, Poland, yellow, you can see. So from this diagram, you can see easily that the economical situation in Poland comparably was not always the best, as you can see here. That's, for example, probably Romania. Here is Lithuania. Here is Bulgaria. So you can see the situation wasn't as good as, for example, in Bulgaria in the 90s. But you must see also that it was on the very stable level. So there were not so big, let's say, differences between the position and the income. Okay, so intelligentsia as this educated class, which is very important. And during the communist times, there were the problem with intelligentsia, because intelligentsia, they do not fit to be a workers. They do not fit to be a peasantry. They do not fit to kolkhoz and sovkhoz. So during the communist time, even at the end of Lenin's life, they created the ideological or ideologically political term working intelligentsia. Working intelligentsia was which was defined not as a class, but as a stratum. So in Polish it was warstwa inteligencji pracującej, warstwa inteligencji pracującej. They've been defined as those people who also are working for the good of the socialist motherland or fatherland, but they of course are the people who are working by their brain, their mind, not physically, for example. An intellectual, so what's the difference intellectual and the member of the intelligentsia? An intellectual is a person who engages in critical thinking and reading, research and human self-reflections about society. They may propose solutions for its problems and gain authority as a public figure. Coming from the world of culture, either as a creator or as a mediator, the intellectual participates in politics either to defend a concrete proposition or to denounce an injustice, usually by rejecting, producing, or extending an ideology, or by defending a system of values. So intellectual is a kind of a upper part of the middle class, of the intelligentsia stratum, who has not only the highest probably possible educational qualification, professional qualifications, but also he's on the top as a thinker who is who sees all the failures of the system, all the injustice in the system, and so on, and he criticized them. So from this intellectual circles came a lot of dissidents in East Central Europe. How we define an intellectual? Intellectual, a person with a highly developed ability of reasoning and understanding objectively, especially with regard to abstract and academic matters. And why this definition is very important? Because at the university, we are trying to educate you. And I cannot tell much about all professors at the university, but I can tell you about myself. My main goal, my purpose of all those lessons in each subject I'm conducting, is to vaccinize you, to use the term of vaccination from our epidemic of coronavirus, to vaccinate you to not to believe in each truth you can hear even from the university cathedra or from the TV or from radio, or you can read in the internet or in the newspapers. You have to, and this is your main goal. You are created by God to do this, in my opinion. So you should be you should high develop your ability of reasoning. So try to understand objectively, and you should criticize all the things which in your opinion are not right. So intellectual is kind of, in my opinion, as a prophet, as a person who, despite of his own wellness, despite of his own position in the society, because he risks also very much. He can be taken into prison. And we know the situation in Belarus, for example, now, or in Russia, that you can be also arrested, sent to the labor camp. You can be judged for 10 years in prison or even more. So for your social activities, for example, for your demonstration against these elections of Lukashenko in Belarus. So the risk of these activities is very high. But if you want to be an intellectual, you should have an active approach to the contemporary social situation and political situation. What are the, let's say, good sides of this story? Of course, you might be finally one of the 50 most influential living philosophers in the world, of course, and you have some photographs of those very famous philosophers here of the world. That's Noam Chomsky here, for example, very leftist philosopher in the United States, but very popular. Here you can be one of the most important people in the human history, in the world history of humankind. So as Copernicus here, or Leonardo da Vinci here, or Shakespeare here. And of course, you might be one of the 121 the most influential people of all time. As here, for example, Albert Einstein here, or Jesus Christ on the right. So at the end, I would like to say a few words about this person. That's, in my opinion, the biggest and the best Polish philosopher of the 20th century, Professor Leszek Kołakowski, who started as a philosopher in the Polish Academy of Sciences and as a professor of the Warsaw University, and he was pressed to go out of Poland at the end of 1960s after the anti-Semitic campaign in Poland in March 1968, and he finally settled in Oxford, and the last years and his later years he spent as a professor in Oxford. He was member of All Souls College in Oxford, and he's renowned around the world as the author of few books which I would like to mention. His main classic books is on the left, Main Currents of Marxism, by Leszek Kołakowski. That's 3 volumes about the origins of Marxism, development of Marxism, and collapse of Marxism. And this is still our times the best synthesis of Marxism written in the world history of philosophy. But he wasn't well known because of this Main Currents of Marxism. He was well known because of his small lectures. One of those lectures concerning the religion, because religion was very important for Kołakowski. He started as a person who was atheist, but at the end of his life, he started to be kind of a deist. So he believed in God, but he wasn't, let's say, the Orthodox, pravoslavny, or Catholic. He was kind of a deist, which is very often in the ranks of intelligentsia, such an approach to religion. And he's the best book which I can recommend to you. Is about the religion, and the title is "If There Is No God." And there are so small sketches or lectures on God, on the devil, on seed, and other worries of the so-called philosophy of religion. So this is a book which is available not only in English, in French, in German, in Russian, in Polish. So you can read Kołakowski, can be kind of a benchmark for you in future. Of course, in Russia, also the situation was interesting in the 20th century, and at least 2 philosophers should be mentioned. One of them is Vladimir Solovyov on the left, and the other is not, he's treated mostly as a writer, because he was a writer, the author of Gulag Archipelago, but it's Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And they are, of course, the intellectuals, Russian intellectuals. This one was, let's say, in the last years of the Tsarist Empire, and this was during the Soviet Union and after the collapse of Soviet Union. They both are very significant, and their approach is very interesting. Solovyov was a kind of a humanitarian philosopher, and he, of course, was very religious, but his religion was, let's say, focused on humans, and on the people, of their wealth and their troubles and so on. So his main books, Divine Humanity or The Making of Love, were concerned and focused on the humans, on the condition of human creatures. And of course, Solzhenitsyn is a different story. That's, of course, the author of the Gulag Archipelago, published in English at the beginning of 70s. But of course, also the One Day of the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which was even got a prize during the Khrushchev final years, and after he was condemned. But before he was condemned, he got the prize for the One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. So Solzhenitsyn was also a very interesting figure, but because he was trying to bring back the traditional ideals of the Russian intelligentsia to the contemporary times. And it resulted that after he got back to Russian Federation in the 90s, he started to be a kind of a thinker who thought about Russia that the best situation of Russia was in the medieval and ancient times, when there was a kind of equality, because the Russian peasantry was divided in the mir, in obshchina, in small societies, and there were kind of common relations, equality, and so on. And this, in opinion of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, was the kind of ideal, because there was no division on very rich people or very poor people, and very powerful people, and very absolutely without any power people. So in his opinion, and he started to wear the gimnastiorka at that moment, so the shirt which was put very similar to Tolstoy and to Maxim Gorky. So his last days were very significant from the point of his views. He got back to the traditional views of intelligentsia from the, let's say, second half of the 19th century. Okay, so this is the thinker, the most famous sculpture of Auguste Rodin, which is now, as far as I remember, the original is in Stanford in California, but the copies are in many places in the world. When someone starts an argument with me about something I know a lot about, now that's kind of a caricatural painting about the quite typical situation. The person who is well educated, had a lot of information, had a lot of read a lot of books, he very often might behave as a superior to the others. And this picture is very good, that's why I took it. It's very good to show you that this person seems to be superior, intellectually superior, if compared with others. And so some very important at the end proverbs: a wise man makes his own decisions, an ignorant man follows public opinion. That's very good Chinese proverb you should remember. Wise man makes his own decision, an ignorant man follows public opinion. So that's why I told you not to believe in television, social media, newspapers. Always try to get information from different sources and try to create your own point of view. Seek education from the cradle to the grave. That's Arabic proverb. That's also a way out of the situation of being, let's say, squarehead person, stupid person. And this is the sentence from the Albert Einstein: intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them. So that's typical Albert Einstein. So at the end, such a sympathetic photo: drop the bus, me and intellectual release that fish, because that shows you also one choice of the intellectuals and of the people of intelligentsia too, or the middle class, that they try to be not only humble, maybe humble not a good word, but to be tolerant and to not to make cruel things to others, maybe in this way should be said. So that's the end of the story about the general things of middle class in the West, middle class in the East, intelligentsia in the East Central Europe, and intellectuals in East Central Europe. And now I would like you to switch on your camera, and maybe you have some questions. Please don't ask me, am I intellectual? I can answer that I'm partly intellectual. I have huge knowledge in some areas and absolutely null knowledge in others. So I'm not an intellectual, let's say, enlightenment type as Voltaire or Diderot or any other French philosopher. I see Professor Helena Krasowska also listening to this story. That's quite interesting. I have a question to Professor Krasowska. if she is available. Heleno, jesteś tam? Because Professor Krasowska is an expert in Hutu history. And the question is, are there Hutu intellectuals? Irina Hryniuk, are there Hutu intellectuals near your hometown?
Not exactly. I'm living in Pokutia. Different ethnic group, but I guess there are someone. Maybe mostly those who spend their winter holidays in the Bukovel, and now we have medicine college. They were very intellectual.
Okay, so this is the time for questions. If someone has a question to me, please switch on your camera and ask the question. Andriy Kucyk, switch on the camera. Do you have a question?
Yes, why not? Why not? Sir, so I have a question about role intellectual or intelligentsia in event in Belarusian protest and maybe in future Russian protest. Do you think its influence will be? It's like and what about influence? Yes, in this event, it's intellection and intelligentsia.
You know, this is difficult to answer. As in English we say of a but. You know, because the problem is that you should make the sociological research. But as far as I observe this protest in Belarus and in the Russian Federation, I see that the protests are, of course, not only in the big towns, but also in the country. But the urban, let's say, circles are prevailing. And when you look at the people faces, there is a lot of young people. And there is a lot of people which we can traditionally call intelligentsia in Poland or in Ukraine or in Czech Republic. So from my point of view, that's what I told you during the lecture, that Kremlin did not take in their minds that the young generation who has not been born during the time of USSR, who are now some of them is 30 years old. So these are the people who are used to have a, let's say, more democratic system than it is. And because they know their knowledge of the situation in the rest of the world, in the West, in the United States and Western countries is very, let's say, significant. I think that they will drive those protests. They will drive those protests and will be the new generation of the people who find themselves in jail, who will be sent into the labor camps with sentences from the courts. So that would be the new generation in Belarus and in Russia of people who do not agree on what is going on now. So maybe not now, maybe not in 5 years, but after a few years, and that probably happens during my life. So I think at least 10 years, 15 years have to pass, and then those people, because of the let's say the regular situation, they are young. Lukashenko and Putin will be the end of those people. They are old. They are in my age. So this is even if they are in a high, fantastic physical condition, the natural condition is that they died. They will die in one moment, and will come someone new. And the question is that person who came to power in Russia or in Belarus would be a new type of intellectual, of the politician, or that would be kind of a continuation of the old way of governing Russia, so the Kremlin type, of Putin type, or Lukashenko type, because this is the answer we do not know. So that might be a modern person with the open horizons, and that might be also the kind of a disciple of Lukashenko or disciple of Putin who continue in the modernized way the authoritarian rule. So that's my answer. But to have the correct answer, you should make the sociological research. And I know that there is, for example, here in Warsaw, Professor Andrzej, forgot his name, Wardamacki, who is a sociologist, who is all the time making the research concerning the situation in Belarus. And I read his research. He's publishing it permanently in English as a small books, each research small book. And that's what is going on from reading this research, that the situation is changing. The social situation is changing, and new layers of the society, new strata of the society are coming to the, let's say, influence the society as whole, and they are absolutely different than the generation of their fathers and mothers. So they do not frighten, for example, as much as their fathers and mothers. So there are some crucial distinctions between this new generation, your generation, and this old generation. That's all what I can tell you off the bat.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Thank you. So if you do not have questions, ladies and gentlemen, but I would like to see your faces. Yes, I can see you. But for example, I have never seen Rostisław Koftun. And I don't remember Rostisław Koftun. Rostisław, could you put on your camera? It's big suspicion that he's sleeping.
Now he's writing an SMS, dear Professor. You can see it on a chat, on our chat. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I can't turn on my camera right now. I'm here.
Okay. Lesia Mielnik. Lesia Mielnik.
I think that half of these students are from Carpathian University, mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe I'm here.
Okay, no problem. You don't want to show me your face. I have to revisit. I have to continue my poor life. Even do not seeing Lesia. I'm very sorry, because I really wanted to see Lesia Mielnik, but Lesia didn't want to show me herself. Also, Aleksandra Żarska would be very interesting to see how Aleksandra Żarska looked like. Julia, also here is Tykieniczuk. Julia, also would like to see Julia, but you don't want to show yourself. You prefer to be anonymous.
I think they are shy.
They're shy. Okay, so I think that's all from me. If you don't have more questions, that's all.